Rise of Kingdoms is a game about getting advantages over other players. If you want to win on the open field, if you want to get more power, if you want to get better alliances and better kingdoms, you need to be better than the average player. So in today's video, I'm going to be giving you my top 10 just overall tips to get some form of value in Rise of Kingdoms, whether it be based on power, based on resources, based on fighting in the open field. So if you want to be able to get an advantage over other players in the game and just become a stronger account and player overall, you want to stick around till the end of the video. Now let's start off today's video with my first tip coming in at I guess rank 10, but these aren't really ranked in any order, it's just what I wrote them down in. And the first tip is really simply, if you come into your expedition and you go to the special missions on level 70, you can see there is one with like a green sword. This is the garrison mission. If you decide to challenge this mission and you go to see where all your troops are on the previous section, if you go into the actual garrison section, the shield where you set your garrison troop, you can set your march to have 750,000 units. And you might be thinking, why does that matter? Why would I care about that? Well, what you can do with this is actually save your troops, like an actual march, into your side save slot with extra troops. You can see right there, my Henry now has 405,000 tier 5 units saved in there. If I were to, let's say, load my Boudica and put 750,000 units, I could save my Boudica to have 750,000 units. And you can do this with any march, it doesn't matter. The game does not discriminate. And the reason this is very useful is because you'll notice as you go through your KVK, the amount of troops that you're using in your march changes because you get stuff like Crystal Tech and you activate boosts like expansions, for example, your 25% or 50% expansions. And the thing is, if you set your troops to have 750,000, no matter what you do, the game will automatically put the correct number of troops in that march. It will put the absolute maximum you can use rather than maybe being 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 troops off. It will always give you the correct number. And as an example, I am going to waste a 25% boost, which is a little bit unfortunate, but I just used one. And you'll see that if I go to load any march of mine, boom, they've got the extra troops already there. I don't have to change anything because I saved it so that I have 750,000 units in my march, which obviously I can't use and no one will ever reach that many units in one march. But it is allowing me to pretty much in KVK instantly get into combat and not have to fiddle around with my loadouts pretty much and not have to add or remove troops. It's always going to be the perfect maximum amount because it's always set to that since it is such a high number. Now my second tip for today's video is actually related to your scout camp, and even if you're in the end game, this tip might be useful to you and you might be thinking, why on earth am I bringing up this scout camp in a video for mostly end game players? Well, recently Lilith changed the way that your scouts work. They added 4 subcategories into the scout camp. No longer is it just the picture of the 3 scouts. There are now the actual normal scout camp. There is a villages section, a cave section, and an other section. And the reason I bring this up is because a lot of players have been noticing they were missing a few caves or a few villages in their city. So the tip for today's video as well is just to go check your scout camp. Check if there is any caves or villages that you are missing. There is a chance you may have missed maybe 2 or 3 villages or 2 or 3 caves that are just going to be free rewards. So go check out your scout camps. There's a whole new subcategory, super easy to use. You can just click on it and click whatever you want and you'll be able to get these free resources. And if you migrate to a new kingdom, this is also a good way, like what I'm doing right now, to just try and smash out everything. And even when a Lost Kingdom starts as well, this is another good way just to go through the whole entire Lost Kingdom and claim all the villages, claim all the caves really, in a really easy way. So just go through those scout camps, double check to make sure you got no caves, got no villages that you haven't visited, and if you do, just go grab them because they are free rewards and you probably don't really need your scouts running around in the end game. Also would like to mention they added a hold for 60 minutes after exploring on the caves. That is also just a cool quick thing I'd mention. And obviously these caves are free rewards, so just check out your scout camps. You may have missed 1 or 2 caves or even just a couple of villages. Now my third tip for today's video is related to the monument in your city. Most players just forget about this because after the early game it's pretty much useless. But when you migrate, there is a good chance that the obelisk or the monument in your city actually resets the reward so you can claim all of these gems again. And I think it does this like a maximum of 3 times. So whenever you migrate, check out the monument. Even if you haven't looked at it in a while, just do another double check. I recently found out in a kingdom I was in before that I hadn't claimed the reward for entering the Lost Kingdom. So just make sure that you've got your monument fully up to date and you've claimed all the free stuff, because it is literally free. And I've found so many accounts and so many players who are like, oh my god, I had like 6,000 gems just sitting in my monument I didn't know I could get. So if you've recently migrated to a new kingdom, or you migrated to a kingdom a while ago and you haven't looked at your monument, just give it a check out. It's a very good chance that there are some gems sitting in there, especially if you haven't migrated that much, because if you've migrated more than 3 times, it doesn't reset anymore. But if you haven't, there will still be gems and resources and speed ups waiting for you. So go check out your monuments. You might be getting another 3 to 5,000 free gems from just doing such a simple task. Now, my fourth tip for today's video is related to the Lucerne or Lyceum of Wisdom, and really simply, it is that the newspaper gives you a buff every now and again. A lot of players seem to forget this, but the newspaper is definitely worth that 1,000 gold pretty much every day, because there's a chance it gives you stuff such as gathering speed and stuff such as healing speed. So try not to be like me and forget to buy the newspaper. As you can see, I forget quite often, and just try buy it every single day, because it is fairly good value for the amount of gold you're spending, and it's going to give you a nice buff every single day. So remember your newspapers, especially if you're in KVK. Whenever I'm in KVK, I try to buy it, especially when I'm in combat, because there's almost a guaranteed chance that something good shows up, whether it's healing speed like it is right now. Sometimes I've got an archer health, I've got infantry health, cat health, things such as resource production speed. All of this stuff you're going to pretty much be guaranteed to get. Sometimes you will get a dud newspaper though that gives you no buff, but most of the time you're going to get some form of a buff. So check out your newspapers every day. I'm going to try get on top of mine a little bit more often. It is pretty much a free buff, and sometimes some kingdoms will tell you whenever there's a really good buff in the newspaper. So it's worth the gold. Trust me, you're not going to miss that gold so much. And the buff is always just a nice extra thing. So buy those newspapers. You're always going to be in a pretty good position when you buy them. Now, my fifth tip for today's video is actually related to gathering resources. And this tip is fairly simple. It's just gather less resources. I know that might sound a little bit confusing. Why would you want to gather less resources? Well, if you know you're going to be going offline for a short period of time, maybe it's an hour, maybe it's 2 hours, you probably don't want to go for the highest level resource node you can find, especially if it's like a level 9 resource node that can take like 2 to 3 hours to gather on its own. Just try and gather a lower level resource node so that when you log back in, you can send your gatherers out again. And the reason this is good is because if you log out for like an hour or 2 hours, and then you log back in, and then you're going to log out for the rest of the day, or maybe for the next 3 to 4 hours, you can basically gather twice. You can gather one low level resource node that will give you maybe 1,000,000 resources, and then gather a higher level resource node when you're offline for longer, which could give you 1.5, 2 million resources. So basically, whenever you're going to go offline for a short period of time, very, very short, like maybe an hour, 2 hours, gather less resources. Just go to a lower level resource node, and it's going to be a good thing, because the lower level the resource node, the less you have to gather. And if you can gather twice instead of just once, you're in a good position. So low level resource nodes are definitely something that are quite underrated. So if you're going to go offline for a short period of time, send your troops to a lower level resource node. You don't always have to go for those level 6 nodes. If you're going to go offline for a long time though, go to some of those higher nodes, obviously, to get the most resources possible. Now, tip number 6 for today's video is kind of like 2 tips in one. And the real simple of it is, I want you guys to start holding on to your research in 2 ways. The first way is just don't max out all of your technology if you don't need it. For example, I don't think a lot of players are going to max out their siege technology just on a whim. And the reason it's a good thing to hold on to your military technology, especially if it's for a troop type you don't really use, is because at a later date, for events which may give you gems for doing research, or for stuff like the Mightiest Governor, these technology upgrades will give you advantages, because most players won't be doing things such as the Watt Steel upgrade to level 10 purely because they've done it before. They don't need to do it. But if you hold on to these upgrades, you can use your speed ups and your resources in a way that other players can't, because you can use research speed ups to get points in events where players couldn't get points in that event because they don't have research avenues available. So hold on to your research, since it's going to be a nice way to literally just get free points in events compared to a whale player. And it's a good advantage a lot of free-to-play low spenders get if they don't have max technology. They're able to use speed ups, which a whale can't use, to get points in the same event. So if you're looking to push in Mightiest Governors or Power events or even Zenith events, hold on to some of that research, since if you can use your research speed ups to gain points in those events, you're in a good position. And the same thing can be said for stuff such as buildings. So if you've got hospitals available, maybe hold on to these hospital upgrades. Or if you've got some resource point available, hold on to it, since you don't necessarily need these instantly, and they can be somewhat expensive with the master blueprints costing gems. Just hold on to them. Maybe an event will come around where you get just a few hundred gems for upgrading these buildings, whether it be just the City of Hope event or an event that gives you 650 gems for getting some amount of power gain from building. So hold on to these buildings, especially when you're getting towards the end game, since you can really milk them for the most amount of gems and the most amount of speed ups and resources possible, rather than trying to push power, since the power that research gives, yes, it is quite a bit, but you would rather get that power during an event that is going to give you some form of reward. So holding on to the research, even just starting it and not claiming it until event comes around, because with research, you can leave it on your lab and just not touch it and it will never ever be claimed. Or even with a building upgrade, trying to time it with events and saving yourself literal just speed ups in general is a good way to A, gain points, B, gain power, and C, just gain rewards. So holding off on research and holding off on buildings is actually quite a good thing towards the end game. Now, the next tip for today's video is also kind of related more towards the building side of Rise of Kingdoms. And the simple thing with the Rise of Kingdoms building is that some buildings give you buffs on the open field. A lot of players don't know this, but stuff like the Hospital level 25 give you an extra % in troop health. And this is just good to know, because if you are looking to do some specific building upgrades to prepare for KVK, and they may line up with an event, they may not, you can do building upgrades such as hospitals, because A, not only do they give you extra hospital capacity, obviously, but you are getting things like those troop buffs, which are going to literally allow you to trade better on the open field. And yes, it is only 4% health buff overall between all the hospitals, but it's 4% of stats you wouldn't have had. So take a look through your buildings. To my knowledge, the ones that do give buffs for the open field are the hospitals, and then each training thing gives some form of a buff. So for example, my infantry, 2% attack right here. Archers are, I think, 2% health or defense. They are health. Cavs are 2% defense. And then Siege are a troop load bonus. And this is for every troop. They apply to all troops, not just Siege, not just Archers, not just Cavs. You are able to just upgrade these training buildings and give yourself a literal buff. So look at the buildings, go into their info, go into the other info section, and you can see the actual buff they provide. Because with the training buildings, for an example, they don't actually show you the buff they are giving. You have to go into the secondary section. So make sure you're keeping an eye out for the buildings that do give you open field buffs and also other buffs to your account, because training buildings will train more troops and allow you to trade better on the open field. So keep an eye out for that. Even some buildings like the research lab will give you extra research speed bonuses, but they do usually say that. So most buildings give some extra buff besides doing what they're literally supposed to do. So keep an eye out for those buffs, keep an eye out for what else they can bring your account, rather than just being a building that sits there and does nothing, like the storehouse, because the storehouse doesn't really do much, but there are buildings like the hospital and the training buildings which can give you value that you may not have known about. Now, the next tip for today's video, which I've mentioned in previous videos, is that you have to use the right gathering commanders when gathering different resources, because a lot of players don't know that some gathering commanders don't even get gathering speed boosts in specific resources. And in the short of it, here's where you should use every gathering commander. Centurion is a generic gathering commander. Gaius Marius is a food gathering commander mainly. Saka, generic gathering commander. She can gather any resource. Constance is mainly a wood gatherer, but she can work in food and stone, but I don't recommend her for gold. Queen Tamara of Georgia is mainly a wood gatherer. She can work in food and stone, but mainly you want to put her in wood. Matilda is mainly a stone gatherer. Cleopatra is also mainly a stone gatherer. Sundok is actually the only main gold gathering commander in the game. Ishida is the only really main food gathering commander in the game besides Gaius, but he is a legendary. And Joan is the best generic gathering commander in the game. So as you can see, each gathering commander has something they specialize in. And some commanders don't even have speed for other resources. So for example, Ashida can't gather gold any quicker than any other gathering commander. Same thing with Matilda, she doesn't get gold gathering speed bonuses. Same thing with Queen Tamara of Georgia, who doesn't get a gold gathering bonus. So a lot of these commanders, a lot of players just didn't know, they don't get bonuses for specific resources. So try and put these commanders into the resource you want them to go to. Really simply, whenever I'm looking to gather a mixture of resources, I actually have a loadout set to gather a full level 6 node for every troop. You can see I have it in order here. Number 1 is my wood gatherers. Number 2 are my gold gatherers. Joan is a generic gatherer, but she's a really good gold gatherer as well. Number 3 is my food gatherer. Number 4 is my stone gatherer. And number 5 is another generic gathering march that will just work wherever I want it to go. So you can see I've kind of just set up these marches in a way so that I can easily push any button and send them to whichever resource I want them to go to. So whenever you're in KVK, I recommend putting these on, adjusting the amount of troops to gather a full resource node, and then just sending them out as you would normally go, because this will improve your gathering speed by maybe around 10, 20, 30 minutes per node, which is better than nothing. So make sure your troops are gathering the right resources to give you obviously more resources. The next tip I would like to discuss, which is something that may help early game players a little bit more than us end game players, is that your effects and your buff effects right here actually take place in the expedition. A lot of players did not know this, and really simply, if you're using stuff like KVK buffs, if you're using stuff like a troop expansion, all of that actually works inside of the expedition. So you can see right here, my Boudica has 260,000 units, which she normally would not have. And the same thing for my Henry, and the same thing for my Cyrus, and the same thing for my Nebu. So all the buffs you currently have active actually will take effect inside the expedition. And you can see it up here. Every single one of these buffs is taking effect in this game mode. So make sure that your buffs are set if you want to try and push in expedition. A lot of players might be thinking, why does this really matter? Well, if you can get a few extra levels in Expedition, it could mean a few extra Ethelflaed sculptures, a few extra epic commander sculptures, some more resources and speed ups per day. So in the early game, Expedition is quite important, and if you have buffs, whether it be even just a 5% defense buff, and you're looking to push an Expedition, then you may as well activate them. And if you're in KVK and it's a Season of Conquest, keep in mind your Crystal Tech will also work. So if you're struggling on a boss, just wait till you get to Crystal Tech in KVK, get towards the end of the KVK, and then you'll just demolish them. So that is one thing to know, all buffs will work in the Expedition, and a lot of players just didn't know that. So if you're struggling in Expedition, consider using a few buffs just to get it over and done with, since it's a one-off thing and you get the rewards literally forever. Now, the final tip in today's video is very similar to a few other tips I gave today, but it's more related to your troop training, and the tip is, very simply, train less or pre-train your troops. And you might be thinking, what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is very simply, if you know you're going to go offline for like 15, 16 hours, you're going to be awake for around 16 hours, maybe only train 16 hours worth of troops. And the reason this is a good thing is because, let's say right now, if I were not going to be up for another 46 minutes, which I probably will be, but let's say I went to bed right now, I'm gone for 12 hours where I've got no troops training. But if I were to train this morning, instead of training 2,000 troops, maybe I trained 1,800, I would be able to train another full 1,800, or maybe even less than that, another 1,000 troops while I slept. So I'd have 3,000 troops within one day, which is obviously not really true, but let's say it was this. I'd have 3,000 troops in one day, rather than having only 2,000. So sometimes training less troops that line up more with your schedule of when you wake up and when you go to sleep is actually better than training 2,000 troops just all the time. So I often like to train a few less troops to try and sit them a little bit more within my day. Often though, I do just train the 2,000 since I'll just stay up until they finish. But if you are looking to train troops, it is often just a good idea to train slightly less troops so that you can get them done within a shorter amount of time and then train a full train of troops after that. So sometimes training less is a good idea. And also pre-training, which means activating like an expansion and letting it just run out while you're training the troops. So just like, let's say, train 50k infantry, don't touch them at all till they're fully trained, and then claim them like during your pre-KVK or claim them during a Mightiest Governor or another event is a good way to kind of save speed ups. So if you're looking to save speed ups, sometimes pre-training your troops before an event even starts is a good way to do it. So if you've got 4 50k reserves or even just 3, you can train 150,000 units, let them go out for like 2 months, just let them finish training, and then just claim them all at once during an event and give yourself literally just a huge advantage. So that is also a good way to get an advantage inside of an event, and it's also kind of related to pre-training and just training less troops in general. So there are my top 10 tips for what you should do in Rise of Kingdoms just to get some amount of value, and it's almost pretty much free to do all of these things. So if you got some value out of these literally free tips, just give the video a like. I appreciate it very much. Liking the video helps support my channel, helps promote the videos, and also allows me to make content like this. So if you enjoyed today's video, or you found it helpful to some regard, give it a like, because I just gave you value which no other players would have unless they watched today's video. So leave it a like, it's much appreciated. To everybody who already liked the video before this, a massive thank you, and to all the people who just gave the video a like, a massive thank you to you as well. Now, I just want to say thank you for watching and hope to see you in the next one.